Good afternoon. We are actually this is the first lunch and learn for our Atlas customers with Kinney Group. So today we're going to do these regularly once a month. Um, we're going to try to do it on the third month or the third week of each month, and going forward. So those who are in attendance here can really get the first ones. So my name is Steve Hunger. I am the customer experience manager here at Kinney Group for Atlas. So here today we're presenting in Splunk Ingest Actions. This is a new feature with Splunk 9. So I guess without further ado, I will introduce the two presenters today, Alice Devaney and Brett Woodruff. So pass it off to you guys. Go ahead.
All right. Thanks, Steve. My name is Alice Devaney. I'm engineering manager for the customer experience team. And Brett, you are a systems engineer on the customer experience team. We're going to be working together here today, talking through ingest actions. Brett's going to give you some hands-on demo, and I'm going to talk through just some of the ideas behind ingest actions and what they enable. So with that, let's get rolling. Steve mentioned this is a new feature in Splunk 9. So Ingest Actions provides a friendly UI for an operation that we've been able to do to some degree in Splunk for quite a while. And it's essentially pre-processing of data. And we're going to get into all the details of what you can do. But it introduces, through this UI, some great new features in ways that we can conceptualize these types of operations. So as administrators, we're able to ensure that we're ingesting all the data that we want, maybe getting rid of some that we don't need. Ultimately, we're able to tackle a problem of license overutilization or excess consumption. So being able to do all this through the UI makes it a much more accessible process where it used to be much more configuration file driven. So today, as we go through, Brett is going to demonstrate how we go through some data masking activities as well as event filtering. And we aren't going to be covering the specific configuration today, but we're going to talk about routing as well and what that means for you and data storage in Splunk and Splunk external locations. So on the next slide, we are going to jump right into ingest actions, but just so you have a point of reference looking at this presentation later, just know that in Splunk 9 versions, in the main settings menu for Splunk, you'll be able to find ingest actions under the data subsection. Before we get hands-on, I want to talk about destinations. We don't have any S3 storage to link up today, but I do want to call out that this is a great feature for being able to use Splunk external storage. And we see this come up a lot with compliance considerations, ability to go re-ingest data, review original logs where maybe some pre-processing before ingestion has changed their contents. And ingest actions makes this really interesting in that you can introduce routing to a destination at any point in a processing pipeline. So any form of the data through your manipulation, you're able to push to an S3 storage location. Ingest actions allow two sections of configuration: rule sets and destinations. Destinations ultimately allow you to apply that within rule sets, which is where we'll be focusing today. But setting up destinations makes for reusable configurations that you can apply to any given rule set. So a lot of flexibility with this particular feature. We are including on this next slide a bit of a breakdown just to give you some help as you're walking through creating a destination yourself, the form that you'll be presented with and the contents to fill it out with. This is very simple. It's essentially S3 metadata identifiers information for being able to access that storage. And so, as I mentioned, you'll be able to introduce this at any point in your pipeline and direct to various S3 locations. So before we get into the first demonstration portion, I want to talk on this next slide about rule sets and what that means for implementing new ingest actions. So a rule set is a concept you need to be familiar with, where you're taking multiple different operations and you're able to apply them in the order that you configure, so that through the pipeline, you're able to tune data exactly how you want, depending on the scenario. As I mentioned, there are quite a few operations, and most of the time this is going to be either masking certain portions of events or filtering out whole events, that sort of operation there. So on the next slide, Brett, we are going to get our first glimpse of what it looks like to look at data in Ingest Actions. There's a very helpful view that we're about to take a look at. In configuring Ingest Actions, we get a lot of questions about how do I understand what data I'm applying this to? And having this feature and working inside of Splunk itself lets you not only use index data, so you're searching essentially for data that's present in Splunk, but you can also, if you were to configure this on maybe a test server or something that doesn't have visibility of your index data, then you can use sample files. This is really helpful to be able to test and create these configurations on the fly and implement them anywhere. Like most Splunk configurations, these are going to be source type specific. So as you go to create new configs, just keep in mind that this is going to be generally applied across source types, and that's how you'll want to be identifying your data. As you're looking at the sample preview, you're going to be able to select time ranges so that if you have some very specific events, you'll be able to single those out and make sure that your new configurations apply to those. So as Brett is going to demonstrate, the data preview gives you the nice and simple UI of what's happening with your events in what the standard Splunk event view. So you have consistency with what you would generally see in searching your data. And we're going to introduce some slightly new views so that you can see what the operations are doing in Splunk. So Brett, over to you for showing how this works.
Okay, let me switch screens here. And just for a recap, you go to Settings, Ingest Actions. And here's where you would go to set up your destinations like Ellis had shown. To set up our data set, we go to Rule Sets, Create New Rule Set. From here, we can turn around and we can either choose index data or a sample file that we wish to upload. For this, we're going to use the index data. And the source type that we're going to use is going to be access combined with cookie. And we use 1,000 samples with ratio of 1 to 100. Let's say the last 7 days. Once we click sample, takes a moment in the testing environment. You're going to see that this is the data preview that we have for the event stream. And then from here, okay. think we're back at the presentation now.
So some different types of operations that we get to do in ingest actions are masking or replacing different log information. So a question that comes up a lot of the time with customers who want to reduce their ingest volume or trying to reduce just the amount of processing that the indexers have to do, which that applies to both ingest-based and workload-based pricing. We have a couple different opportunities here to handle our data. A lot of times if you're working with sensitive data, you want to be able to mask information. And so masking allows you to, I've seen frequently in Splunk training videos, you might recall seeing some filtered data that will put replacement characters. And so that will essentially keep the log the same length. You conceptually understand the value that you are covering up, and it's more for the sake of privacy and compliance. But another opportunity that we have with masking is a very common trick you may have seen in any regex find and replace type operations, and that is actually removing content from a log. And this is what we started to see much more frequently as an approach to reducing ingest volume, is identifying the fields that you use in your current alerts or what you hope to consume, whether that's driven by the Splunk Common Information Model through data model fields, or fields that you have incorporated into your unique knowledge objects in dashboards and other reports. And so you can identify those fields and maintain the structure of the log so that as everything is extracted, it still looks correct in Splunk, but you're able to get rid of the noise, get rid of the things that you're ultimately not using. And that's ultimately letting you maximize the data ingested in Splunk, use all of what's present. So Brett, back to you on showing how it works to mask events in Splunk.
Okay. Like Ellis had mentioned, sometimes admins want to be able to mask sensitive data such as credit card numbers, social security numbers, date of birth, etc. With Inside Ingest Actions, what we can do here is we can add a new rule, mask with regular expression. And we create a new rule under our sample data set. And from here, we're going to enter in our regular expression that we want to match on. So in this sample, or in this example, what we're going to do is the session ID that's listed right here. Let's say that we want to redact that or mask it. So we put the regular expression in that box that we want to match on. And then here we would put our matching regular expression, which we're going to replace it with redacted. Now, if we click apply, we can see over here in the data preview what is being affected and what's being replaced with. Along the top here, we can see the number of events that are being affected, unaffected, or all events. Also, on the left-hand side, we can see what our total sample size was and the effect that we've had on that sample set. So by this, we've had a 3% reduction in the amount of ingest that would be coming if this was applied as it is. So with that, I can pass it back on to Ellis.
All right. So as you saw there, very friendly, showing that preview of what's actually going to be removed and how we're replacing that with new data, or completely dropping it is another option we have. There's a difference between this type of operation and another type of operation that we see very broadly applied to ingest reduction. And so that is a difference between masking events and filtering events. Masking is going to be on an event by event basis and apply that specific operation across all logs that match a particular pattern. Filtering applies to full events. So we're looking to find a consistent pattern. As we discussed, this applies to a specific source type. And if we have a field with a particular value that we're able to key in on and show that we don't want to ingest, then filtering lets us not only remove, say, that field, but because that event is not relevant to what we want to be investigating, we're able to drop the entire event. So, for example, we're looking at these web logs. Maybe it's been decided that we only need to ingest logs for troubleshooting. We only want to ingest errors. So events for successful connections don't apply. And we want to be able to filter that out or maybe route them elsewhere. So I'm going to throw it over to Brett, and he'll show us an example of filtering logs.
All right. So our first task, like Ellis had mentioned, let's say that we have a specific piece of data in each event that we want to remove. So let's say, for example, in this example data set, we wanted to remove the client browser information. It was unimportant to us. What we would want to do is, once again, click Add Rule, and we're going to use the mask function again for this. And then, once again, we would use our regex that we want to match on, along with the capture group for our replace expression. And once we click apply, once again, we're going to see what exactly is being affected. And here we can see that the client browser information from each one of these events is being removed, and it's being replaced with nothing. So we can see that, once again, the number of events affected, unaffected, or total events. And on the left-hand side, we can see that we've had a further reduction in ingest by 38%. So we're down from 78 kilobytes to 47 kilobytes. Now, for the other example that Ellis had given, where we want to remove an entire event from our sample data set, we're going to use filtering. So for this, we're going to use filter using regular expression. Once again, for our source field here, we're going to use the raw, because we're going to use the raw event. And for the drop events matching it regular expression, we're going to use a regular expression that we want to use to match on. And once we click apply, we can see that we are now dropping all of the events that have a status of 200. These would be all of the successful web events on this particular data set. So the only ones that we're seeing, if we click over here, are the affected results, and you can see they're all 200. And if we click unaffected, 500, 403, 500, 406, these are all of the events that would be associated with errors. So from there, I can pass it back on to Ellis.
And as you all saw there, that particular filtering operation dropped the ingest 85%. A great opportunity to reduce ingest volume with event filtering. Thanks, Brett. One simple operation that we can apply at the end of a rule set is setting a particular index for routing different types of data. Occasionally, this is done in Splunk config files, directing multiple types of logs within a source type to different locations. And this is done often for the sake of leveraging Splunk RBAC config, so that we are able to ensure the right people are able to view the data. So as we're working to process a larger source type and identify specific types of logs, we can push those to a particular destination. Setting data or setting different indexes for data sources does allow a more granular and logical division of those data types. And it also lets us have a more custom data retention policy per individual types of logs, which can be driven by our investigation workflows or how we seek to utilize the logs in Splunk. So, Brett, in the Ingest Actions UI, you can show us it's very simple to set an index within a rule set.
Yes, it is. So from here, all we would need to do is just once again click Add New Rule, and under Set Field, click Set Index. From here, we can set the condition that we're going to match on. So from here, we would use regex, and then the regex that we're going to use to match on, and then the existing index that we want to use. Actually, and then click Apply. Now we can see all of these particular events are now being routed from the main index to the web index. So from there, I can pass it back on to you, Ellis.
This is a very, very helpful feature. If you've ever worked with that before within simple props and transforms, it can be a challenge. So making it nice and easy in the UI and allowing that type of operation for logs that we can match on with regex is really great. Like we mentioned earlier, we won't be routing any data to S3 today, but creating a destination is very simple. Similar to the configuration Brett had just shown. And so sending data to Splunk external storage is going to make sure that at any point in this processing through the rule set, we can clone a data feed and send it over to S3. We see often implemented that an original copy, a raw version of the logs, may be sent to S3 as the first step. And then we have some secondary processing that fits our needs within Splunk, allowing for overall a minimization of the volume of logs coming into Splunk. So Brett, back to you on routing configuration.
All right. So to route to a destination, all you would need to do here is once again, click Add a Rule, and underneath the route is Add a Destination. From here, you can either, on your conditions, you can set a condition, either by none, regex, or eval. But if you leave it at none, and here, if we had previously set up a destination for S3, we could select it here. But for this example, we're just going to use the default destination just for representational sake. So if we click Apply, well, I'll click Clone. Okay, it is applied actually. It didn't give me anything here to show. But what happens is now we have this, the data is being processed through all of these rules, and then a copy of it is being sent, would be sent to our secondary destination. Now, what makes this extremely helpful is that we can grab a hold of this bar right here and drag this up here to the very top, right underneath our sample data set. And what'll happen is now this data is coming in with no edits, no processing being done. A copy of it is being sent to our S3 destination that we had previously set up. And since this clone events and apply more rules is currently on, what will happen is that the rest of the data will continue to pass down through these and have these specific rule sets applied. So you end up with one version or one copy of the data being sent to S3, these rules being applied, and then the resulting data set being sent to a new index. I can pass it back to you, Ellis.
All right. So with that, we've configured a full rule set to apply to this access combined source type. So implementation of these rules is really interesting. If you're familiar with Splunk configuration files, you'll recognize immediately as you create your rule set Ingest Actions will provide you with a props and transforms configuration. And as you dig into what's provided, you'll see that there's some new terminology that's specific to Ingest Actions. And so ultimately what this is doing is going through and showing all the configuration you've done in the UI and allowing you to place that on heavy forwarders, an indexing tier, wherever you want this processing to take place before logs are ingested and indexed. So we've included this slide here for you to be able to go back and reference. Please do reach out to us for this presentation and more conversation on how we can implement Ingest Actions for you. But as you can see, the output of this really is just a few simple configuration files. So as you're able to test and configure rule sets, you can save versions, implement this in configuration management or version control systems that you have for Splunk, and fit it right into your data onboarding and pre-processing processes. So with that, we are wrapping up here with our Ingest Actions Lunch and Learn. We hope you enjoyed the demonstration, and please let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Alice and Brett. If you do have questions, drop them in the chat. And also, if you have any suggestions on what you'd like to see for a Lunch and Learn topic, drop it in the chat or pass it on to one of us when you talk to us next. Okay.
I'm seeing the first question on stripping PII and being able to send a clean raw version to a separate location. You would absolutely do that through configuring destinations. And as Brett showed in that last portion of the demo, you would simply put a routing rule up at the top of the rule set so that before anything is touched, then it's going to go over to S3. And then another question, how is this different from Cribble? Functionally, this is actually accomplishing a lot of what we have seen with customers implementing Cribble at high level. Ultimately, a pre-processing to change volumes and reduce ingest volume. What's nice about Ingest Actions is this works within Splunk. I mentioned it's kind of difficult sometimes to be able to handle logs in Splunk if maybe you don't have visibility on the asset you're working with. Giving a Splunk UI to be able to look at your index data and do some testing is really, really helpful. So a big differentiator is really that this is just native to the platform, and this works with your heavy forwarders, your indexers on Splunk 9.
I'd also like to add that, like Ellis had mentioned earlier, for any Splunk administrator that is trying to actually go through and manually make props and transform edits, you know, a lot of times they have to make these edits, apply them, and then see if they work. And in the meantime, they may be dropping data that they actually want out of error. With this, you can actually set it up and play with it and see that you're getting rid of the data or modifying the data to the exact specification that you're looking for before ever applying it, and actually look and see what the result is going to be.
Okay, well, if there are no other questions, thank you everyone for your time, and look forward to seeing you in the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.